Hey everyone, how's it going tonight? Doing amazing. Glad you all came out here tonight to the Generative House of Web3 for this lovely Art in Web3 Generative Art with Santiago. I'm George. I'm an ecosystem manager here. Who here is familiar with the Graph Network? Awesome. So we're EdgeNode. We're the initial team behind the Graph. We wanted a physical presence for the local community to come, congregate, network, and really build out their visions for Web3. If you're interested in co-creating from this space, talk to me, talk to one of my colleagues, Elizabeth, Trish, or Noel. We'll point you in the right direction. We're always open to collaborate on events, workshops, and whatnot. Without further ado, I'll pass it along to Lisa.
Thank you, George, and thank you to EdgeNode. House of Web3 is such an amazing space, and thank you for letting us have these events. This is our 4th Art in Web3 event, and we're so excited to feature Santiago. This has just been amazing, and we're excited to mint this project shortly. Also, I want to thank our sponsor, FX Hash. So Max is going to come up in a couple minutes and tell us a little bit about FX Hash, which is our partner and minting platform for this evening. And I wanted to thank exhibited.at for verifying and archiving this exhibit tonight, and IYK for the POAP disc dispenser. Also, my co-hosts, Luz Donahue, who's an artist, and Kyle Gordon. He's in the back there too. Thank you, guys. And the project is going to be available for 72 hours following the mint. And so I will be sending follow-up email to everyone that attends tonight. And you do need to have a Tezos wallet set up if you don't have one already. And I sent links, and there's QR codes around for setting up a XKEY wallet, either custodial or through using your email or social media, or non-custodial. So with that, Luz is going to interview Santiago in a couple minutes, but I wanted to have Max from FX Hash come up and say a few words first. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to say a few words about FX Hash, what we are. We're a generative art platform, and we focus on digital generative art. We're on Tezos at the moment, and soon we'll be launching on Ethereum. So that'll be a big change for us. We've been going for about 1.5 years, and it's been a pretty crazy journey, but the real focus is on openness. That's really what we believe at FX Hash. So it's an open platform. Anyone can create art. That's why we started on Tezos. It's a very environmentally friendly, low cost of entry chain. But yeah, naturally we've started growing and growing. We have all this incredible art. This generative art right now is, for those of you that aren't familiar, just a crazy bubbling space. There's people breaking barriers every day. So yeah, we're really excited to be bringing ourselves onto Ethereum as well, and also, not just for us, but for the collectors and for the artists to have a place where they can, turn this crazy experimentation and this artistic limit pushing into a real career and a real lifelong pursuit of this art form. So that's what we're about. Look out for us. You might see us around. We're in a lot of art shows. We put on a lot of these events just to try and, spread the word about digital generative art. I think it's such a really unique application of blockchain, right? Like everyone here knows what we're doing and knows about the blockchain, but it's a really cool thing that fits really well with blockchain technology. It brings so many doors open and helps us support so many fantastic artists. So I don't want to keep you guys too long just giving my sales pitch for FX Hash, but if you want to chat about it, totally happy to. I'll be in the back. But yeah, I'll hand it over, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hello. Just a quick thanks to Lisa and to Kyle for putting these events on. Just want to share that I, as an artist, have grown just from being here. I'm super excited to have this just casual conversation tonight. I'm sure that you guys are going to have a lot more questions that are more technical than I have, but we're going to get into just a little bit of process. I'm sorry? Sorry. Should have started there, Santiago. Hi.
I don't know how this works.
All right, I think we're good.
Yeah.
It's a good start.
All right.
So I want to know kind of what you had in mind when you came in and how it developed into where you ended.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's an artist proof, like I can consider this like a final artwork, but it's part of an ongoing project that I've been working on for the last 6 months. It's a short generative movie, short generative short film. And it will be, I'll be probably finishing it by end of next year, and it's like exploring a little bit the space in which this short film is going to be happening, which is about like anxiety about time going past and going through, and about like construction and destruction of memories. And yeah, this one was like a fun experiment to work on. I wanted to like test several like technical capabilities and also like aesthetic directions. And I ended up on this like short loop that takes like 20 minutes to keeps iterating every 3 seconds, like pulses. It's kind of like what it takes like normally a breath, like it's like something's recyclable. And after like 15, 20 seconds, it stops into a final result, which is the final shape and the one that will be on the basically the generative tokens screenshot once we mint it up.
Very, very cool. So can you tell me, just kind of walk me through when you have an idea for a new piece of art, how does that start? Like, did you just get an idea for a collection right away, or is there a seed, or what is that initial process like for you?
No, generally, like I tend to like dissect reality a lot into like generative components. I'm pretty sure that if there's generative artists here, like you see like, I don't know, like a Persian rug, or you see stuff, you start seeing tiles, you start seeing like different forms. So in the end, it's like a very natural way of expressing ourselves. And then when it comes to like subject, or when it comes to the basically like the art form, is mostly, and I always talk about this, like very intimate, it's very like personal, normally are like things that I'm concerned about, or something that it's just like a tiny thought that normally becomes something visual, or sometimes I work reverse, something that I visually see, and then like in retrospect, I just suddenly like look into it and try to look back to know, or to try to understand where it came from. So
That's
it's
really
kind of two
interesting.
processes, like forward or backwards.
Okay. The way that I like to, I paint, and the way that I like to think about it is you're almost like walking around your environment, and then there's like a hook, and then you have to take that and follow it. Is that kind of how you?
Yeah, I feel like if you paint, like, sometimes like you paint in a more instinctive way. Like, I don't know, like some people like talk about like what do you want to express or what do you want to tell. But many times it's just like you're just kind of working for yourself. You're like kind of like just either working on something that is visually interesting to you, or something that like is in your head and you just want to take out, and then like look for meaning of what you did backwards. Or sometimes, I don't know, you have like a clear idea, like for example, like collections that I did before, I know that, for example, there's two that are very clear on this sense. Like I feel that in art blocks, I did one that was called 319, which was like, I had an idea, I had like a notion of what I wanted to talk about, and then ended up formalizing it. And then there are many other projects in which it's more like instinctive and more visceral. It's just like creating and then sort of like trying to introspect and look backwards and see like what drove you into creating that stuff. And I'm sure it happens to you with painting too.
Totally. I'm curious, for this piece, do you have a title in mind, or how does the process of titling and starting to do that retrospective work look like for you?
Yeah, on titling, I've always gone through a lot of like, it's kind of a shit show. I've always been like, sometimes I start using like Latin nomenclatures, like because kind of my origins, whatever. Then I start using numbers only, but then I run out of ideas of meaningful numbers. So then I honestly don't know. Like the titling and wording of projects always is very hidden to me, especially now that we all communicate in English, not my native language. So it's always like tough to express, and it's very difficult for me. Like words are very like language as a coder. Language is something very important, so I'm very mindful about my words and what I try to use. But again, I'm not using my main language. So when it comes to titling, I tend to resort to either more something that touches back home, which is Latin expressions, number, words, etc., or like formations, or like sort of like word games, or numeric titles.
I do want to encourage you guys to go on Santiago's website and read a little bit about his work, because he actually writes really beautifully about the subject that he's touching on. So, but hey, someone's editing, right? So just to switch gears a little bit, can you talk a little bit about how you even got into generative art and what your background as a creative and as a coder is?
Yeah, I mean, my background is on design and arts. I studied graphic design. I majored in typography, and then little by little started transitioning or becoming more interested in art. But from the beginning, when I started like doing graphic design, for me, like the most important thing was like putting systems together, like building things that were like replicable and like, in a way procedural or generative. And I feel that this has translated quite naturally into my art practice, especially in generative art, where in the end we're telling a machine what do we want that machine to do, and then like sort of getting results back from it. So I feel it's been like a very like steady transition from like a very like sort of methodic design practice and principles into generative art.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense, that even when you're doing more creative work, you're thinking about it from like a systems building perspective. Do you find that there's a difference in how you solve more logical problems and more creative problems, or is it?
I mean, I think that creativity has always, or at least for me, has always been like funneling. Like if at the beginning maybe you start with infinite possibilities, right? And in the end, like when you come especially from a practice of graphic design and like a more sort of something that in the end needs results, and there's like a budget and there's like a timeline. So what you do is you end up like getting those as constraints and limiting your creativity into needs and into resources. So for me, like that has sort of transitioned a little bit into art. Like I'm not like very keen into exploring like new tools. I have like my tools, and I like to I sort of like limit myself to the tools that I have, because those create like a very like natural limitation to where can I go or where should I go. So in terms of like process, yeah, it's mostly like the studying, I feel, and like then reaching something that feels right.
Cool. Yeah. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit more about the concepts that you actually cover. So one of the things that I think is really interesting that you've written about is this idea of code as a transhumanist poetry. Do you want to share a little bit more about just how you came to that? And I know we've had some conversations about that too, and kind of the mystic in you.
Yeah, the transhumanist principle, it's just like, I mean, maybe it's like a grandiloquent word that we use in profile sometimes, but at the same time, I feel there's like a big aspect to it. Like, in the end, at the moment that you're capable of like communicating with a machine using like a common language, you're sort of like entering into maybe like a tiny overlap of reality between like machine reality and human reality. But that tiny overlap is definitely like transhumanistic, or I don't know, transmachinistic. I don't know. Anyway, but it would be like a space that you kind of share with machines, and like you're actually talking their language. So you're kind of a guest on their world and not the other way around. I mean, like we're getting right now with AI on the other side of the spectrum, but mostly right now we're kind of like being like sort of invited into their world by speaking their language. So in that sense, I feel that what we're doing, especially when we're creating art, by writing text, there's like certain degree of like, yeah, I feel like transhumanism, or like, and that could be considered poetry or art. Like that's like what I always thought about is like basically like code being the container for genuine art is like the first layer of like it's something that's purely there. It's like a set of like a sequence of instructions that you give to a machine to execute art. So I feel that, yeah, like
There's kind of like a truth in there because it's a very honest, it is what it
yeah,
is
it's
in
like
there.
that machine language can relatively only be one way. Like you instruct the machine how to do things in one way, and that's it goes that direction. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, something I heard you say earlier was, are we evolving along with the technology, or are we evolving the technology? And that question, exploring that, is just like a fascinating rabbit hole you could go down for
Yeah, it touches,
probably hours.
yeah, it touches a lot into like, for example, like singularity, or like if machines, if like technology is like a consequence of us evolving our machines, or like we're actually evolving them on their will. It's like a matter of agency. Like if we are the ones deciding when are we evolving technology, or we actually don't have an agency on that, and we're just sort of slaves from the machine.
Questions. One more thing, I just want to know if there are any specific types of technologies that you're interested in now in exploring, or if you want to even share a little bit about why FX Hash is what you went with for this collection. Is anything you can share about what's kind of rolling around in your mind about your work and the tech side of it right now?
I mean, I don't know if you've heard about AI, but it's pretty strong these days. So, no, I'm like, in terms of technologies, like I've always been very focused on WebGL and JavaScript. Those are like my main tool set, like wherever I always am. And FX Hash, I've been like using it for a long time. I feel that, I mean, they've grown like crazy and created this platform where everyone can participate, and like it's like purely democratic. So like when we were deciding where should we meet with Lisa, like I felt that FX Hash was like always like one of the top candidates, because like in the end, I mean, everything is there. It's like evolving constantly. It's just creating this huge ecosystem. I didn't know they were going to move into Ethereum. That's interesting.
That's
I
kind
wanted
of
to know-
exciting.
I wanted to know more about that. But yeah, it's definitely one of them. Like definitely one of the most exciting platforms out there. So to basically have your art living it.
All right, anything else you want to share before we go into Q&A?
Well, thank you for coming, everyone. I hope that everything made sense, and yeah, I'll be around.
Anyone want to? Any questions? Do you want to?
Hello. I'll step back a little bit. So thank you for presentation. One thought I had, or one question I had, is you said you studied in typography. So, I mean, typography has, a certain discipline to it. So how have you applied, or have you not applied that discipline to the current work you're doing?
I mean, to this current one, I wouldn't feel that. I mean, if you look at the progression from design into coding, I feel that typography, like, definitely like, played a very big part. Like, there's a bunch of platforms, like, what was the name? I think something Fab. There was a Python library said by, I think, was Eric Speakerman, I don't think, which basically allowed you to, and I don't remember like the actual, but something Fab. I don't know. Anyway, but it basically allowed you to code, to actually write typography using Python. It was like my first, like, sort of first contact with ever like coding, and that's what it actually led me into understanding like how powerful as an expression tool coding could be. And in terms of like typography, I majored in typography. I was a typographer for a couple of years, but it's tough. And yeah, then I moved into editorial design and progressed further into other territories. But I feel that definitely without having exposure into the set of tools, that like, especially like on the typographical space, like whenever you're designing an alphabet, for example, you want to have coherence between different glyphs. You want to have like certain parameters that are sort of, like they reproduce across the whole spectrum, but they're not something that you can maybe like just write down very simply. Maybe it's just like a way in which a curve suddenly like moves to an ascender, for example, or like the chamfer that you apply on every corner. And I feel that typography kind of has this thing that it is highly parametric. and highly like you can create like systems that can, like, it's necessary to have a system in order to have typography that sort of works in the traditional world. Then there's experimental typography, but in the conventional one, you want to have like pure coherence, like, because in the end you want to have like a family that's coherent of glyphs. So without coding, without code, without programming rules and like replicating those rules across the whole spectrum of glyphs within a family, I feel it would be impossible to have good typography. So that's sort of how that led me to generative art. There's probably, you could say there's nothing here regarding typographic practice, but I feel that without that sort of like bridge between design and coding, there wouldn't be, for me, any generative art. So that's what I believe.
All right, who's next?
In terms of like Web3 and getting into like the valuation or value of art, like in terms of generative art, the idea is that you can create much more art. So technically that's more value, right? But then people are like, oh, well, there's a question of whether that's going to devalue art. You know, how do you think art can, you know, in the generative world, how we can make it such that it isn't that such that it becomes more value as opposed to it's diminishing the value.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's a super interesting subject. Like, I don't know, maybe 1 year ago when like everyone was creating generative art and minting like crazy, etc. Like, one of my thoughts was like, what the fuck, we're gonna have like 2,000 pieces out there very, very soon, like 3,000 pieces. Like, how can they sustain value? Like, one of my favorite projects that I did is like one that I did 1 year ago in Art Blogs. It's called 319, which actually talks about long-term thinking. Talks about like forgetting about where we are right now and think about like, you know, like think more long-term and like sustainability. So that one I only minted 19 pieces. I think it's like one of the which has the lowest amount of the collection with the lowest amount of editions in, I don't know, in Art Blogs. At least it was maybe. And it was also done through a Dutch auction that lasted like 3 days. That's as much as I was sort of allowed or recommended to do. But the whole idea was to be very mindful about how many editions you create, like how much work do you create, how much do you put out there. I feel in the end, especially right now that we're coming into this space, which is great, in which art is being democratized, like anyone can have access to collecting, curating, and creating art. I feel that's very important that as artists or as collectors, we're very mindful and truthful to, we're actually genuinely doing this because we believe that's holding the utmost quality. And everything else in the end, which is, you know, goes down the drain. I mean, that's the truth. Like, in the end, like, any artist that's not like mindful of what they're doing, like any artist that's just in like cash grabs or like they're, that's gonna, at some point, it's gonna just go down. So I think it just boils down to the responsibility from both collectors and artists, something like that. And then, yeah, like just thinking about what we're putting out there and like if we genuinely believe that's the best quality that we can find.
Thank you both. So do you see any value in distinguishing the capacities of AI, generative art, with the artist, the person? I mean, is there a value in distinguishing what AI does good and what it doesn't, and what is unique about human intelligence?
That's a tough one. I haven't touched so much into AI, so I don't have like a super strong opinion about it. But in the end, the way in which I see it is, I mean, in the end, anyone should be able to create and like use any tool available at the level that they feel like. If the only thing that you can do is just like I don't know, stable diffusion from the forum and just run it and like do a prompt and generate art out of that, then, you know, that's like as much as you can do. I think that one of the biggest values is going to be like how do we model this, like, you know, what process do we put in place in order to generate that art. I feel that, and I have very little knowledge on AI based art, so I cannot talk too much about it. I'm starting to use it a little bit, and the way in which I do it personally, I just like normally I get generative art and I sort of augment it using AI, like a very like thin layer of AI, using it not too heavily based on that, but heavily based on my input. But I don't feel that that should like in any way like affect value in the end. Like I don't know, the whole role of like researching within that infinite space of that into latent space that I got to, like basically like researching into that space, like all the time spent into that. Like, for example, I know a person here in San Francisco that spent like hours and hours, like I think 4 hours a day speaking about spirituality and religion to ChatGPT, like literally 4 hours every day. And just researching like how broad that spectrum is. And I wouldn't feel that using it like can like increase or decrease value of art. I just feel that's like a space to explore, and I'm pretty sure there's corners within that space that are like valuable in some way. But I really don't know how to answer that question specifically.
Do we have another?
I've got one. When I was in art school, drawing letters in ink and gouache, hours and hours and hours of perfection, you know, like aiming for that algorithmic perfection that I think is pretty amazing when it comes to like talking about Python libraries. I feel like we've gone from physical to digital, and we're coming back around to a lot of physical, you know, quilts, embroidery, etc. And I'm curious how you think about physical as far as your practice and what's going on in generative art right now.
I mean, I'm not very strong on physical space. I always touch digital. The way in which I've ended up understanding what I do is like digital becoming sort of like a tangible matter. Like in the end, like when you spend hours and hours and hours doing this, like it just becomes like, I don't know, like working with your hands with a piece of clay. Like in the end, you want to replicate a 3D structure, and like you're introducing parameters on a machine, but in the end, you know what parameters you're introducing. There's like, it's true that in the end we use randomness, for example, to generate like diversity, like generate collections, etc. But that randomness is controlled by what we actually genuinely want to do. So for me, like that's very personal, the frontier, like the edge between like what's physical and digital, especially when we spend so much time on the digital space, it's like kind of becoming like very, very blurry. And yeah, I mean, I would like to be more active on the physical space, like to do things with my hands. It's just I'm not capable of. So I basically resort to digital. But yeah, and sorry, what like the question? I'm like, sorry about that.
I didn't really land the question that clearly for you. I think that what I was saying is that I think as there has been this huge explosion of digital exploration, one of the places that people have gone as they've continued to explore is pushing into the physical from the digital. So plotting, weaving, you know, snowfro, digital embroidery, or, you know, moving to embroidery, things along those lines where like exploring the physical from the natively digital is sort of like the next frontier for some folks. But I think also there's a philosophy that these things are natively digital. They belong in a digital space. And that was why I was asking the question, is because I think it's really interesting to hear where folks feel like these things should stay digital, or they really want to push into physical because fill in the blank, you know, like that's sort of the philosophy. Have you thought about that?
I mean, personally, I don't have any thoughts about that. Like, I understand like the need to go back into the physical, especially like when we spend so many hours like writing in front of a machine and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Like one of the like most rewarding activities I did recently was like building a computer with my hands. It was like some time of my screen, and I saw like certain degree of like, I don't know like if you ever built a PC, it's like very nerdy space, but it's crazy right now. And like the last one I built was when I was 18, and you have like 3 options, like this or that, and that's it. And right now you have like 1,000 different things. Like for me, I believe it's like a similar feeling. It's just like getting away from the screen, creating with your hands. and that frees your brain to go into like many different routes. And I'm guessing that's what people that are like deriving their art practice into the physical space are feeling. But I don't know, I cannot talk to them. I haven't experienced it that much, so I wouldn't know why they're doing that or how that's rewarding for them. But yeah, definitely interesting.
I just want to quickly interject. That's actually what I do. But I'm curious because when I look at your work, I see you basically building a three-dimensional thing. And to me, that's like mind-blowing. So it's almost like I can see these things kind of meeting in the middle eventually.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely this thing that they were telling me for in the end, like the difference between creating with your hands on physical matter and like treating digital matter as a physical thing, or like molding like a digital reality little by little. Like for example, like when I do like more like music live shows, what I do is normally like very slowly transition like geometries from like point A to point B, just like adding new like new instructions for that 3D entity to mold and change and shift. So there's not a big difference on like having like a piece of clay rotating on a how do you call that thing?
Like a wheel?
Yeah, a wheel, and then just like morphing it with your hands. Like in the end, like it's kind of the same. Like you're just generating out of certain instructions that might be analog or digital.
That feeling makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, it's like almost like a shaping. That's so cool. Do we have another?
Like just in the thread of this digital physical world, are there artists that you're inspired by or that you really admire? I'm feeling like with the grid stuff, Agnes Martin a little bit, and that's like pretty old, but still, that's what I'm feeling. I'm just curious who you're inspired by. And then the second part of my question would be around sound. Where do you think that's going with what you're creating now?
Yeah, on your second question, yeah, sound always plays a very important role on everything that I do. Like normally when I'm working, it's always going to be with music. It's always going to be with like certain cadence and rhythm in mind. Like I work pretty much most of the work I do is animated or like a response to like certain, like basically it's going to have like transitions from point A to point B, which is like very similar to how music works. In terms of inspiration or artists that I admire, like right now there's like so many that it's like very, very difficult. I wouldn't know like which ones to there's like 1,000 of them, but one of that always comes back is like Soul Movie. It's like a little bit like on the a couple of years ago. But I feel that like he's one of the most like one of the genuine like generative artists in the end. Like what he did was blueprints. Like he gave instructions to a group of people to basically like paint or create their art piece. So for me, I always end up landing over there. Then in terms of visual, I'm a big admirer of that. There's a Japanese he's architect. He's multifaceted, but okay, I'm not gonna know her name now. Yeah, Sujimoto. He's like photographer, architect, everything. So one of the biggest ones that I've always admired. And on the generative space, I don't know. There's a lot. Like I'm a disaster with names. So it's very bad for me. But there's a lot of people that I admire and follow. But I wouldn't know which ones to mention right now.
Should get a little list from you we can like share on social after.
Yeah, I'll try.
Because I want to
I'll try to
know.
get some.
We good? I think that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, yeah, and the mint should be ready in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I hope you guys can stick around for that. But if not, we will be sending out the links to anyone that came this evening as well. So, and it'll be open for 72 hours. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Luz and Santiago.